What's going on, guys? Figured I'd do another little review here on a game I just had a little earlier today. I thought it was pretty good. Now this is going to be against Labyrinth, and I thought that aside from the opening hand being pretty good, decisions were cool. It was a good example of chain blocking, so we can dive into that a little bit. I figured that would be beneficial. So, yeah, right off the bat, pretty normal. Obedience, one of my favorite opens is KT, Penny, Wally. We Joyous these two, and we let Penny pop to the graveyard off the Obedience effect in the end phase. However, whenever you have Hide and Seek in your hand, um, that changes a little bit, right? Because you got to remember that whatever you're leaving to pop will not pop. It'll stay on the board because of Hide and Seek's effect. So you either have to make a quick decision to not use Hide and Seek at all and forego protection on the next turn, or get creative. So you're going to see this is going to be a pretty non-standard line. Another thing, he chose to use Max C for some reason after Obedience resolved, which, yeah, I'm not really sure about that one, Chief. So he basically missed one card here. He basically missed one draw. So because I only gave him, well, 0, I didn't give him 1 off of the Obedience. He could have chained it to the activation. So he missed out on a card here. So instead, I decided to just get a little greedy and take 1 extra special summon. So he ends up getting 2 cards anyways. But because he missed that first one, like, I felt okay with doing that. Because otherwise, if you're under max C, you 3-body, you Joyous, and that's 2 cards, right? And in this case, I 3-bodied and he max C'd afterwards. So I could Joyous for 1 card, or I can, focus on getting Penny into the graveyard and using Hide and Seek for the protection. And, that way I feel like I have a little bit more competent of an inboard here. So I go about doing it that way. Now, because I end up giving him 2 extra cards, I decide to go with a different approach than normal. So you're going to see here, this is Mary Melffy's. So obviously you could go into Melffy of the Forest here, and you could ditch Penny to the graveyard, and then just when in your standard line, you just make sure Pony comes out. Pony gives you Penny back, right? Pretty usual stuff. However, I went into Mary Melffy's here for a very specific reason. I give him 2 extra cards, right? So the odds are pretty likely that he has at least 1 hand trap. What can I do at Mary Melffy's that I can't do with Melffy of the Forest is I can chain block, right? And because this is right now my only play, I have an Imperm and I have whatever comes out of this, right? This is really not an interruption. People are afraid of it, but it just brings Forest back. And then you can take advantage of Forest's negate because it doesn't require materials. So especially if you chain a Melffy, like a Melffy Puppy, Chainlink 1, Mary Melffy's Chainlink 2, you'll protect Puppy from Ash, and at the same time, if Forest lands, it'll land right before Puppy comes back, and you'll immediately get to apply that effect. So it's almost like an aggregator, that thing that MathMech throws into the graveyard, right? To kind of have that delayed on summon effect, or it's really good against on summon effects. So yeah, anyways, Mary Melffy's here, and I'm missing out on the bounce to hand. But one thing that is interesting, if I wanted to, I could have bounced Penny to hand if it was still on board, right? So sometimes I'll have like a 3-body, and then I'll rescue Cat, and then I can Mary Melffy's and push whatever that 3rd body is into my hand if I don't want to stack it in Joyous. So just something to keep in mind there. But yeah, this is important because I feel like I've given him at least 1 hand trap. I have to protect this line, and the only way I can do that is to chain block. Now I see Imperm right there. And a big thing, first of all, we'll kind of rewind a second. He used Welcome Labyrinth off of his Chandelier effect, right? So he put Welcome Labyrinth down in my MP2 and, turn ended, whatever. So I know that he's going to special summon at some point, right? That's just what Labyrinth does. And then he puts down this Imperm. So I know once I see that I actually cannot use Joyous until I see him commit to that Imperm. Because chain block all you want, Imperm is Imperm. You know what I mean? Lately, I've been trying to play around Gamma. So, I could have popped Joyous much earlier. But yeah, I just, I could have popped it right out the gate. But if he has Imperm or whatever in hand. I guess he couldn't have used it because he had set the card. But if he had Gamma, I'd be screwed. You know what I mean? And I feel like a lot of lists are running Gamma lately. However, that being said, as soon as I realized that, okay, this is just a traditional Labyrinth, probably, maybe some Unchained or something in there. I don't know. Usually trap-heavy decks don't have the space to run Gamma. That's just it's just kind of a common thing. So I would wager that maybe less than 20% of all Labyrinth decks are running Gamma. So once I see, this Imperm come out, I'm like, okay, I could wait for one of these to special summon, but at that point, like, I might not have what I need to shut down what he can get into, right? So I took the risk that he doesn't have Gamma in hand. And I waited for Imperm to come out so that I can, just dodge it. So if he targets Joyous here, I just bounce, right? He targeted Mary, so I was like, oh, wait, okay, I guess I'll just bounce anyways. I really could have waited until after this came out, because I could have, yeah, I guess he was trying to bait out the activation because this is in response. I don't know. At some point later, I could have chose to wait for him to get a body on board and do it. Just something to keep in mind. Gamma exists. It's very real, and that's an instant game over, right? If he Gammas that, I lose all of the contents of that. I got one Imperm in a dream. It's not looking good. So, anyways. Brings the homie out. That's cool, because we know with the special summon on Chain Link 1 that we're going to get, we're gonna get an extra special summon trigger off of the Wally we're pulling out. So right here, you're gonna notice. The chain linking was very, very intentional, right? It's very intentional. So by doing it this way, you guarantee that if he has Ash in hand, which he does, that it can't hit Wally, right? He's protected because they came out at the same time. That's why I choose Wally to go Chain Link 1, and I choose Kitty Tail to go Chain Link 2. All the chain links I ever do, they're almost always very, very intentional. It's very rare that I just click whatever. Because a lot of times you'll have like Melffy, Puppy, and Caddy, and you'll have to decide like, okay, Caddy can be Chain Link 1 because I really need Penny, for instance, because it's not in my graveyard in this imaginary scenario. And Puppy, I don't need much because like, what that Puppy line gonna end in is probably a Calentosa or maybe a Kitty Tail or something. Not as valuable, so I'll sacrifice Puppy in that respect, right? Or if you have a Finny or a Pony out or something like that, and you need to get Wally off, you can have. That's why sometimes it's nice to pull 2 Melffys out of Obedience, and that way you can use the lesser to chain block for Wally. Now, Imperm is like really the biggest threat these days, which is why I like to go Sprite Elf off of Rescue Cat open. But that protects from Imperm, and then this is kind of the way to protect first Ash. Those are kind of your 2 options, right? So anyways, he ashes, which is fine. I didn't actually care about throwing this. I would have ditched Pero, and I would have had one more kind of disruption, depending situational disruption. And then out comes lovely Labyrinth, big bad herself. You know how it is. Just go into the business. Now, why did I choose to use the effect of Mary Melffy? He's negated. What am I doing? I'm wasting my time. I'm being ridiculous. I'm chain blocking, right? So let's say that he has defied the laws of physics and can use 3 ashes in 1 turn. He still can't get me, bro. But, let's say there's anything in his hand that responds to that. Let's say it's an ogre, right? And it pops my Puppy, and I lose whatever's going to come out of that. It's just anything, really. But initially, and I want to kind of go back to turn 1, the reason I pulled this out here was so that I'd have the luxury to chain block whenever I did, right? So his effect's not going to go off, but it's still chain blocking. Ash isn't really a threat anymore, but you never want to take the risk, right? It could be ogre, it could be all kinds of silly, ridiculous stuff people are running these days. So with that in mind, we don't want to. We initially were going to use Mary Melffy's chain block for Joyous to guarantee that Joyous got off, right? And that way we could play around Gamma. We wait till them to summon a monster. They can't Imperm, they can't Gamma. And then we can pop Joyous, pop Mary. And that way we guarantee that Joyous goes off. And then from there, we have the KT and the Wally. And KT blocks for Wally. And then from there, we have Puppy and Caddy. And Puppy blocks for Caddy. You understand how that works? And by doing it that way, you guarantee that your plays go off so much more often, which is very, very key. It also leaves you with a little bit more flexibility because, like, let's say, for instance, Puppy gets impermed right off the bat, or Wally gets impermed right off the bat, and you have Puppy out. Well, you can just Wally off of the Puppy or something like that. Or, oh, hey, Kitty got hit with Valor or imperm before he could activate its effect. Well, now you can get cheeky and use Puppy to fish that or whatever, right? So there's it becomes a lot more options when you're very, very effective with your chain blocking, because it really confuses the opponent, who likely doesn't know a ton about Melffys to begin with. It likely confuses them to really try to figure out, like, okay, where's the resource that he needs the most coming from? And then they have to make a decision with whatever interruption they have. But anyways, and I just wanted to touch on that because chain blocking is like so fundamental. But yeah, the Mary Melffys wasn't actually necessary in that instance. It was just nice. But then what happens? Boom, hit the Mary Melffy into the Locust. So I fished Hopier off of Caddy. So I still have the opportunity to grab, to have Pony fish me Penny out of the graveyard. Obviously, the Labyrinth player knows the Locust discards one card. He got scared and he ditched Torby here because obviously that was a smart thing to do. And with respect to that, I can just immediately chain link into something else. And you guys are probably familiar with this. This is the tried and true, the lifeblood, if you will, of the Melffy combo. It's worth mentioning that aside from this being a couple of things, so Locust is main phase restricted, right? Excel Synchro, main phase restricted. Penny, however, where is he? Oh, he's in the graveyard. Penny, however, is not main phase restricted, right? So keep that in mind. It's very important. You don't want to accidentally dive into Locust or Excel or something like that and before the battle phase is ended, or because you're going to wait for them to go battle phase so you can devalue, force them to go into MP2 or whatever. It's not going to work with these. Yeah, there's some times where I'm not paying good enough attention and I throw a Locust out there on battle phase, and I'm like, crap, and he gets run over and I lose it. And like the other bodies I need are just sitting out here all set up, or Excel. So why I say that, though, is because you can still use Penny in the battle phase for your Mary Melffys or Arclight. So Mary Melffys can a lot of times bounce one card in the battle phase and really, really shut down a battle phase. Because after that, it goes into Forest, which can absorb a hit as well. So it's really, really effective. It can really snake you out of a couple games. So just keep that in mind. I popped 4. Whoa, wait a second. Why did we pop 4? Well, keep in mind, unlike our standard line, which is Penny into Desert Locust, we already had Mary Melffys on board. So we were able to fish Hopier off of the cat effect, throw it onto Mary Melffys, get into our Locust that way, and we still had the kitty tail or the pony body, depending on what we wanted to use there. And by doing it that way, I guarantee that I have 4 bodies in hand, as opposed to waiting for the pony effect to get triggered. Because they could have gone into battle phase, attacked over it, triggered it that way, and then I could have done whatever. But again, like I mentioned, can't use Excel Synchro in battle phase. You can't use Locust in battle phase. You can summon them, and if they're big enough, maybe they don't get attacked over. But if not, you're losing, potentially risking a lot of value there. So yeah, something to keep in mind. I saw that this is kind of based on the cards he had in his hand and his board. This is what he looked like he was doing, where his play was going to end up. He's probably going to attack over me with that turn, and that was that. So I figured in that moment, as soon as he sets the trap, he's already used his field spell. There's no traps for him to immediately chain to, so he couldn't even trigger the Lovely and stuff like that. And And yeah, I felt like Satellite in that moment. 6,500, 2,500 unaffected pop 4 is it's just gnarly. It's really gnarly. And Labyrinth has a really, really hard time recovering from popped back row. Especially on their turn. So their Labyrinth is a deck similar to Melffy in the sense that you generate value on your opponent's turn. So your turn is really requiring setup. So if you can't properly set up, then you're just super, super weak. You're super exposed on the following turn. Now Labyrinth obviously has ways to make plays on the opponent's turn, but that's why we wouldn't let them. We just cleared it out, and an unaffected body does a lot against Labyrinth because they're required to deal with it on our turn. And then at that point, you can, I mean, dude, I can't tell you how many times I'll have a huge satellite and I link it off into an SP. You know what I mean? And it's a pop 2, right? Banish one off the effect, and then potentially banish another if somebody reacts to it. And you know, just the same way, maybe I don't need MP, or maybe I attack for 6,500 first, then I go into SP, right? That's typically the line. So just crazy value out of that play there. Anyways, I've rambled enough. Hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully you guys found something out of it. If nothing else, I thought it was a pretty cool game. So much love. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'm around. If you ever need anything Melffy, man, just holler my way.